the biggest line item on there, $19.3 billion, is cash value life insurance. Do as banks do, not as they say. We could get to a $70 million exit, about half of what we were thinking. The net is really not that much lower than if we were to go to 150 million with all these other factors. They're willing to pay upwards of 15x your EBITDA.
Hi, I'm Kate Chichi, and welcome to Deal Diaries, where business owners share how they bought and sold businesses so we don't have to learn the hard way. Let's dive in. Joey Mure walked away from a safe career at Wells Fargo to build a $30 million insurance business that he's now scaled through acquisitions. Joey also co-founded Wealth Without Wall Street, a podcast and community to teach people how to generate passive income outside traditional finance. And if that's not enough, Joey is homeschooling 5 kids to think like entrepreneurs. Joey, excited to dive into it all. Welcome to the pod.
Kate, I'm so excited to be with you. Thanks for having me.
So before all of this, you were a sales manager at Wells Fargo. What made you leave and start an insurance agency?
It was while I was in the mortgage business, I realized there wasn't a lot of things that I really connected with in terms of retirement and finance, like personal finance, and putting money in the stock market, 401ks and IRAs just never really made sense to me because I didn't understand it. And I don't believe that I had anybody that really knew what they were doing to manage it either. And it was, and then I got introduced to this concept called infinite banking in a book I read in 2010, and I started implementing that. And after 4 years of implementing that with my family, I got so fired up about it. I was like, people need to know about this. Like, I felt like this, like I had a secret that nobody knew. And I was sitting at a conference learning along with all these other people. And I literally had that thought, why don't more people do this? And I look around, there's only 300 people in the room that are certified to teach this across all of North America. And I was like, well, there's not enough people doing it. There's not enough people actually getting the word out. And I was like, I think I need to do this. I think I was making over $300,000 a year in the mortgage business. I just feel like this is what I'm supposed to do. And I talked to my wife and she immediately said, you should do it. I left, like you said, very stable career, everybody knew me in the marketplace. Like it was hard to do, but it was at the same time, it was super easy because I felt like it was more of a calling to do it. So I literally thought I'm just going to be able to help people more comprehensively than just helping them with their mortgage.
Mm-hmm. Calling, I think it doesn't make sense for a lot of people. They just are either too afraid to admit it or don't know that there's another option out there.
That's the key. I don't think there's enough talk about alternatives to the same old plan. Like go to school, get a good job, work for 40 years, and hopefully one day retire if you have your health. I have to, keep my head down. I have to keep putting money into this, abyss over here. And I'm having to stack up cash and hope it's enough down the road. It's just not a good plan.
And you mentioned this alternative option of infinite banking. What is infinite banking?
Well, one, I would encourage you, if you haven't read the book, Become Your Own Banker by Nelson Nash, it is the gold standard for this whole concept. And the real premise of it, if I can sum it up, is that this is a calling to a totally different lifestyle. It's a way in which you take control of your finances. And you do that by storing capital in a place that you own and control and can get access to at any time. And you do it in a way that mimics banks. Okay, so if I ask you, Kate, where do banks keep their tier 1 capital? What would you say is the most common place people would think?
In cash or stocks or real estate assets.
My guess was real estate.
Yeah.
Because, you look around the big metropolitan areas and what do you see? You see the big high rises and it's always the nicest buildings, the marble floors, everything, right? Real estate. And actually, when you, I got introduced to this, I looked at a balance statement, or excuse me, a balance sheet for Wells Fargo, because that's where I worked in 2009. And I looked down, and I think it's line number 10 or line number 11. It says real estate assets was 11.3 billion at the time. And I was like,
Mhm.
but then you scroll down, and I think it's line number 41. The biggest line item on there, 19.3 billion, is cash value life insurance.
Mm.
And you're like, what? Like, why would a bank put money in cash value life insurance? And I'd always heard this is the worst place to put money. In fact, Kate, when I went around to all the executives at the bank that I work for, I went to them with this book in hand and I was like, hey, this guy's talking about cash value life insurance is a good place to store capital, and you can leverage it and buy assets and all this sort of stuff. And every one of those guys were like, Joey, that's dumb. Everybody knows life insurance is a terrible place to put money. And I was like, but the bank you work for is literally putting almost double what they put in real estate into cash
Mm.
value life insurance.
Wow.
The shocking part about that, Kate, each one of those executives was actually insured by the bank. What taught me at that point, Kate, is you have to do as banks do, not as they say. And so that's the impetus is you as a consumer, as a investor, whatever, you have to put capital somewhere before it's deployed. And so this book breaks down you can do it in a very properly structured whole life insurance for the mutual company, dividend paying company, and you get all these benefits for that. But then you can leverage that capital at any time for any reason into any asset type that you want to create passive income.
Mm.
And that was the key unlock for me is like instead of putting money into 401ks, IRAs, just my bank account, which had virtually no benefit whatsoever to me, I could have all these other benefits and have access to capital. Because here I was, Kate, I was making over $300,000 a year. And if you ask me, hey, Joey, there's a $200,000 deal over here that you could take advantage of, I'd be like, I don't have any money.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Because I had been siphoning off money every single month, every single paycheck or whatever into things I couldn't access. But now I shifted after 4 years of doing this new concept, this infinite banking concept.
Mm-hmm.
I had real access to real cash at any time. And that unlocked for me, hey, I need to start investing this. How can I start investing this? And that led us to all these other things. So that's what the concept did for me, and what it does for our clients is it unlocks that investor mindset that we've kind of put off to the side when we've just put money into qualified plans and other things.
So you essentially saw that the bank is investing twice as much as they're putting in real estate. They're investing in life insurance.
But the key thing is this is their safest assets on the balance sheet. It's got built-in guarantees. It's being paid dividends, and it is accessible at any time through either withdrawals or leveraging loans at the insurance company level. These insurance companies have been around for almost 200 years, and they've never missed a dividend payment. The ones that we work with. Think about through the Great Depression, through the 2008 crisis, through the 70s, the gold, losing the gold standard, all these things, they've consistently paid, and they've been around because they're super, super like slow and steady wins the race. How many banks do you know that have gone out of business in the last 100 years? Right. So there's a reason that banks put their safest assets on the books of these insurance companies,
Yeah.
because it's just like they're borrowing that security.
Yeah. So you learned this information and then you decide to start an insurance agency. Can you briefly explain what an insurance agency does?
So the insurance agency exists to help place people in the proper carrier that works best for them. So we really could write with, we're independent, so we could write with all these different carriers, but there's really 4 or 5 that are uniquely created to be able to handle this concept, this infinite banking concept, and we're licensed, if you will, with all of those. And so then we would say, hey, so Kate, tell me what you're trying to accomplish. How does this concept help you? And what will you be doing with it? And what are the key components of your financial situation? And based on your answers to that, we would take that knowledge and we would say, oh, you know what? This one company, Penn Mutual, for instance, or Lafayette Life, or, there's 4 or 5 others, they would be best suited for you because of your age, because of your health, because of the way in which you want to structure this new, this life insurance policy around your life.
I might have a consult with you about that after the pod. When you were 3 years into running this agency, you started a podcast about passive investment. What was the connection between selling life insurance and interviewing passive income experts?
For me, like all of a sudden, I've been stacking up cash or cash value, which is in these life insurance policies, and I have to do something with it, because the way in which this works is it's getting paid 3 to 5% guaranteed, like tax-free growth. So that's not bad. But then you think, but I can also leverage that money because there's a loan function that you can borrow against that cash value. And so it's really like, if I don't take advantage of that, I'm really leaving some money on the table, because I'll get the guarantees and I can go leverage it into something else. But then the big question was, well, what do I invest in? And our clients, after 3 years, are like banging on the door. Hey, Joey, Russ, what should we do with this money? Like, we may have hundreds of thousands of dollars sitting in these cash values, and we didn't know what to tell them. And so we started the podcast, literally. This is no joke, Kate. We didn't even know what a podcast was. We have a one-off conversation with Kate in our office. She's telling us what the cool things she's doing with her insurance policy, and we want to share that with our other clients. And at the time, we probably had maybe 200 to 300 clients. And so we're getting to that critical point where it's like, we can't just have one-off conversations. How do we scale the conversation? And the young guy in our office is like, we could just start a podcast and record it and then get it out to everybody. And so this is, I am not exaggerating this. We started the podcast recording in January 2017. We get, 8 months in, and then we launch it because we wanted to have enough podcasts built up. We start the podcast in like August of 2017 or something, and it starts rolling out, and people are like, the clients, we're sending it out to our clients. Okay. Well, they're like, hey, this is a great podcast. Thank you for sharing, blah, blah, blah. Well, then 6 months after that, we start getting phone calls from people all over the country. And they're like, hey, I've been listening to your show. Could you help me implement what you've talked about, this infinite banking thing? I want some help with that. And I'm like, literally, I answer the phone. I'm like, who sent you the podcast?
Yeah.
And they're like, nobody sent me the podcast. I just opened up my podcast app and searched, and you guys came up. And so I've been listening. I really want to do this. Can you help me? I'm in Massachusetts. And now, Kate, think about it. We're in Alabama.
Yeah.
And we're like, how did they find this? How did they get this? But we had no idea that the podcast was being streamed all over the world. And so all of a sudden, we have people all over the country, all over the world listening, and they're like, hey, can you help us? So we had to scale the business very quickly to handle all the people that were like reaching out to us. And it was totally unintended. We had no idea.
That's incredible. So you didn't invest anything into growing the podcast. It was all organic growth.
I don't share this with everybody, Kate, but I'll just tell you, if you ever can go back and listen to the first, 25 episodes or something, we had no idea what we were doing. We literally had a Mac Mini on a desk with one mic It was like a Yeti mic, the big, bulky ones.
Yeah.
And we had three people speaking into one mic. And we sent our podcast to this editor, and she was like, "Hey, I'm getting some trouble here. I can't edit it because there's only one track." And we're like, "Well, yeah, we don't have multiple tracks." She's like, "Well, what about your mic and his mic?" And I was like, "No, no, no. We only have one mic in one room." And it sounded terrible. And she was like, you need to get multiple mics. Kate, it was ridiculous. And somehow we started learning as we did it, and, became better and better at it. But
Yeah. That's how you know the content was so good that even this poor sound quality did not stand in the way of this being distributed globally and growing through word of mouth and just organic growth.
exactly, it would never.
And Joey, can you explain how an insurance agency makes money?
Yeah, so each one of the carriers that you represent, so as an independent agency, you have contracts with multiple carriers. Each one of those carriers, depending on what product that you sell, whether it's term insurance, whole life insurance, there's all sorts of other variations, but those are the only two that we really concern ourselves with. They get paid a certain commission from the insurance company to the agency. And so there's varying different ways. The ways in which we actually, if you've ever kind of looked into life insurance, they're typically very, very heavy commission products that, make it seem like, hey, I'm not going to really benefit from this as a consumer. The way in which the infinite banking concept is set up, we're actually reducing the commissions by about 60 to 70% in order for there to be more cash value accumulation early on for the consumer. And so it's kind of a backwards way of selling life insurance or setting up life insurance, but all of the revenue to the insurance agency comes from those carriers in terms of their commissions to us.
Companies.
Yeah, they pay you what's called first year commission,
Hmm.
and then there's renewals every year thereafter, assuming that they continue to pay their premiums.
Hmm. So as long as somebody has life insurance, you continue getting commission off of that.
Right, which actually makes the business model very attractive to be sold at some point, because those renewals are pretty much inevitable.
Yeah, it's like a perfect subscription model.
Yeah,
What's
exactly.
what's the renewal rate on those?
What we call persistency rate is in the like 96, 98%.
Wow, that is
Yeah, it's
so
very
high.
high. It's very
It's
high.
like close to no churn. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Um,
Because when people are doing it for the purpose that we set it up, they're using it as a banking system. And so they would not ever want to let go of it based on the way it's helping them to create financial freedom. Saying it's no longer just a death benefit, which is what people have always kind of sold life insurance as. This is just a supercharged, storage facility for their cash so that they can go and do deals and deploy that into creating passive income.
so the person who gets the life insurance,
Mm-hmm.
apart from the life insurance itself, and being able to have your family get paid in the event of your death, how are they getting this cash earlier?
So as you pay your premium, a percentage of that premium, as an example, I'll just give you an
Hmm.
example. You put 100,000 a year into this premium.
Yeah.
Think about it like I could put 100,000 into my savings account, or I could put 100,000 into a premium
Hmm.
in a policy design like this.
Yeah.
Well, in the very first year, depending on how this is set up, the historical way, like if you went to just a traditional insurance company, you would have zero cash available the first year. And people are like, that doesn't sound good at all.
Yeah.
The way in which we design it, according to the book, we're in the 60 to 70,000 is available right away, like within the first week or two.
So you pay
And
100K and you can use 60 to 70K of it.
correct. Yeah. And every year it gets better. We have in our training, we show our oldest policy that Russ actually started in 2010. And in the last 11 years of, it's a 16-year-old policy at this point, the last 11 years, when he put in $1 of premium,
Mhm.
it was kicking off $2 of cash value. So think about that in terms of comparison to a savings account.
Yeah.
Like if I put 100,000 in this year, I might get 104, right? But in a policy, I won't have a full 100 because there's a trade-off. I have death benefit and other things that I have to pay for. But by these things get more and more efficient. So in his case, he's putting in 100,000 the last 11 years, it's kicking off 200,000 in cash value every single year.
Yeah. And this is an option that's available through these life insurance companies, and you're an agency connecting people with these life insurance companies. It's not
100%.
exclusive to your insurance agency.
Correct. We're the best. We're the
Yes,
best,
of
Kate. Yeah,
course.
of course.
So, you've been running this insurance agency since 2014. It's been growing a ton thanks to the podcast Wealth Without Wall Street. And then you decided to acquire two businesses. What made you decide to go with an acquisition?
So a little bit of backstory to that is 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, I was interviewing somebody on the podcast and they had just been acquired by private equity. And he started talking to me about our coaching business, which we now call the Passive Income Lab. And he said, hey, would you be interested in selling that? And as he got into it, he was like, well, it looks like that's still too early on. It's probably not going to be a good fit. But talk to me about this insurance agency that you guys have. And we started talking about that. And he said, do you know how much, what the equity multiples are on that? And I was like, I was shocked. I was like, no, I had no idea. He's like, they're willing to pay 10, 12, upwards of 15x your EBITDA.
That's really high.
And we were like, whoa, we had never heard of anybody selling their business in our space. Usually people just die, doing this because there's no benefit of selling. But when he started sharing those numbers, we were like, this is interesting. Like we should look into how we could do this. And then as we started talking to private equity, they said, well, we're going to just take your company and we're going to roll you up with others. And then we're going to sell, there's a second bite of the apple and all this kind of stuff. And I told Russ after that, I said, if they're going to do that with us, why wouldn't we go ahead and buy other companies and make ourselves much bigger, much faster, and essentially take the bite of the apple before they do, kind of thing. And so we just started talking to other companies like ours that were smaller, and they automatically were like, had no idea this would be amazing. And we started recognizing that there was a big arbitrage, Kate, that we could buy these smaller companies at roughly 4x or less, maybe, their net income, and then sell combined at a 12 to 15x multiple. And so we're like, this is a no-brainer. Like we should do as much of this as possible and take our timeline and condense it, into a couple of years instead of 5 to 10.
So you decided to acquire a business. What were you looking for in an agency to acquire?
A couple key things. Number one, we wanted to be somebody that we kind of had some trust with, like that we knew in the industry, had a good name, reputation, and that their business was aligned with ours in many cases. Number two, we weren't looking to buy a company that the principals would be absent from. They had to come with, it was almost like an acquisition hire, essentially, like we were buying the talent with it, that we wanted them to continue to produce. And that was a little bit tricky, to find somebody that was willing to stay with the business. And yeah, we wanted them to be in a position where we could add value to their existing business. Like we were further along with our infrastructure, on the service side, on the marketing side. Like we wanted to be able to add value that would make their business even more attractive and more profitable. And so those were the key aspects. And of course, they had to be in our niche, the specific infinite banking concept. We wanted to buy those agencies focused on what we do.
So you decide on these criteria. How do you go about searching for a company?
Well, thankfully, our industry niche is so small. We know most of, if not all of, the biggest players. And this was the people that we ended up purchasing were actually friends of ours. These are guys that we've known for over a decade, have been at the different conferences together, met up with, and they've been in our office visiting with us and vice versa. So it was pretty easy in this case to find, but the hardest part was then, determining is this a win-win, and going through that, kind of the due diligence.
Sounds like it's beneficial to be friends with your competition.
Yeah, exactly. Good
Yeah.
point. That's a good thing because I think a lot of people do see, hey, there's all this territories and competition, and man, if you can give a big vision of what's possible, your competition wants to join you.
Ooh, say more about that.
Well, I mean, just like when we rolled this out to these guys, they were thinking very small. Like, this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. I like what I do. This is what it's always going to be. And we start talking about $100 million exit, $150 million exit. And they're just like,
Jaw
what?
drop.
Like, how? And as we kind of unlocked that for them and showed them, hey, these are the levers that private equity is telling us, we think it's very possible. It's not even an if, it's more of a when, and do you want to be a part of it or not? And it was just like, yeah, tell me more. Like, help me get there. Help me get the pieces in place, and I'm on board.
What was it like from the first conversations to the closing of the deal?
The good news was we were working with an investment banking firm, and they were able to help us do financial diligence on the very front end. And that part was very beneficial because we weren't the bottleneck. We were able to say, hey, connect them to here. This is our first step. We have an LOI based on what we think that they're worth, but here's the financial diligence, and then we can actually provide an actual purchase agreement, assuming that they meet this criteria. And I will say there was a delay because one of the companies that we were buying was not super organized with their books. And so it took probably 90 days to do the financial diligence. When we found out with a second company we were talking to, they were able to do it in a week or two because they had it all
Fast.
buttoned up,
Yeah.
But yeah, so that was the first step for us is financial diligence. Took about 90 days, and I wish I had learned at that point to set the proper expectations that we're going to set our purchase price off of what we find in this diligence process. So if it takes you 6 months or whatever, we're going to do it based on the time frame that we're saying. Because what happened is this took so long, it took almost 9 months for us to close, that they had grown the business in that 9 months, and they came back to us and renegotiated a higher
Mhm.
buyout because they had gotten a big, so they were like, hey, those numbers are 6 to 9 months old. They were already old when we started. Now it's really old. And
Yeah.
so we had to kind of renegotiate, and that we lost some money there.
Mhm.
Um, I say lost, meaning we could have paid a little less upfront for the same deal.
So it
Yeah,
sounds like set the expectation that the price will be determined based on the current value, not when the deal closes,
correct.
and try to stay more on top of them in terms of them providing all the required.
Exactly. Yeah. And now that I understand the
Great
process
lessons.
better, I
Yeah.
could do that.
Yeah. And in our conversation before we started recording, you mentioned that when you closed, the transition was a little bit rough. Can you share a bit more about what happened there?
Are you seeing my tears right now, Kate? Like, oh, the
Yeah.
tears. No, so one, we're not super operationally gifted. My partner and I were very much more visionary, big picture, and I think we should have really spent more time thinking through the actual transition details. And we have people on our team that were doing that to a certain level, but not at the level that was required. Number one, we didn't purchase as a part of this their actual bank accounts that were where the money was flowing from their insurance carriers to their company. It took 4 to 6 weeks for these insurance companies to make that small change. And so we were in this awkward position where we had bought the company and the principals knew that they no longer owned it, but they were still getting commissions sent to their account, and then they were having to wire them or forward them to us to then get a smaller percentage of those paid back to them. It
That's
was a
crazy,
nightmare. It was just like psychologically, that is a bad place to be.
for sure.
Now, good news, we were friends, right? So that was not as bad as it could have been. But we were like, whoa, that is a bad idea. We should have definitely done that differently. Number two, we had a kind of an understanding that they were going to start receiving leads from us
Mhm.
as a part of this, but all of the details within our system that allowed them to receive those leads on their calendar and through our CRM and all the different intricate, back end systems were not set up in advance. And so it was weeks and weeks of trying to get that all done, and it just wasn't well done. It ended up being a nightmare.
Yeah.
The last thing I'll tell you about the transition is they had a very proven business model that was working very well. We had a different business model, very similar but different, and we should have just said, rock on, keep doing what you're doing, and you have all the benefits of now working with our internal back end systems and everything, but just keep doing the front end stuff that you're used to doing. Instead, we were like, hey, let's teach you what we're doing, and you guys can apply it, and then we can grow better, bigger and better and faster. Well, the problem is our system, because it was so different, became a distraction. It became a hindrance to them really growing their business because they kind of like slowed down to figure out ours. And for the first 6 months, they just struggled. They struggled to get the numbers that they were used to getting. And that was bad. And so we eventually were like, hey, quit trying to be our second company, be your own company under our brand, under your own brand, and let's just keep rocking on the way that you're used to. And then the last thing that we had written into our agreement that they would have an earnout. And the earnout was 1/4 of their total purchase price. And it would be available to them once they hit a 15% CAGR over 2 years. But the intricate details of that wording bit us in the butt
What
because
happened?
we were thinking, well, you have to hit 15% the first year and 15% the second year, which is true. But the way in which the attorney wrote it, it didn't start counting until year two,
Mm.
meaning they still have the final number, the two years of that 15% annual growth, and they have to hit it in the second year. But it de-incentivized their production the first almost entire year. And so, for all intents and purposes, they could have done nothing for one whole year. And yet, we're anticipating their production, their renewal income, and all these, which she did get the renewals because those didn't require activity. But we also were anticipating what they had done the previous year and 2 years of their business coming in, and they weren't producing hardly anything for that first year. And we still had the debt service, but no income from what we expected. I shouldn't say no income, but just not nearly what we had anticipated. And it was just because I think the way it was written it just took the incentive out of the whole deal.
Wow, so many learnings there. And it sounds like definitely you want to make sure that you control your bank accounts or the bank accounts of the company that you're acquiring, because it's a lot easier for you to gain control than to tell all of their clients to reroute the money to a
Very.
new bank account. And that it's just generally rough to integrate systems. And sometimes you may just want to let the company be and use their own systems and read your documents.
And the interesting part when we look back at it, there's all these drafts that lead up to the final APA being signed and finalized. And the drafts were actually written properly. And then the final, like last draft and then the final, got switched. And we didn't catch the switch. And we were like, I can't believe, like, that one small thing made such a big impact on the overall deal. And I mean, you kick yourself after the fact because you're like, man, I should have caught it. But it was really also like, man, leading up to it, it seemed like everything was going to be fine. And so, yeah, don't assume.
That's really rough. And how was the deal structured? You mentioned an earnout. What were the other components of the structure?
Yeah, so we set it as a 4x of net income was the purchase price. And the 3x was paid out in a form of either upfront and equity. And then the last, fourth or quarter was the earnout. They had either 20 to 50% of that 3x had to be equity. So 20% minimum, 50% max. They both chose to go to 50%. So then they were able to pay the other 50% upfront. And then the final, like I said, is the earnout, which is the last quarter. And I like that structure. I probably wouldn't change the structure, but I would change, again, the way in which it was worded, that the earnout encouraged and like maximized production out of the gate because, you've taken on debt and you need to have the actual revenue to pay it.
And how would you reframe the earnout to encourage them as much as possible to maximize the revenue you're?
I think I would just have set a minimum threshold that had to be met in the first year. Instead of there just being a 2-year CAGR kind of number, it would have been hey, we're going to reduce this if this minimum threshold isn't met or something to that nature. I would definitely have had a 6-month or a 12-month check-in that would have created some urgency. Because you think about it, Kate, if you have no urgency for a year and you just got a large lump sum,
Easy to relax.
human nature takes
Yeah.
over,
Yeah.
and so yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I would have done.
And with the earnout, do you have a preference whether to set it based on revenue, on EBITDA, any other number?
In this case, we just, because we're shooting for an exit, we wanted to maximize just their overall growth of their company to encourage and emphasize organic growth. And so I would probably keep it the same that we did. Essentially, just what was your net income before we started, and then put a riser on that. 15% in this case I thought was fair, but also didn't allow them to just kind of sit back.
So based on the growth of net income.
Hmm. Yeah.
And I just wanted to say it really speaks to how good a vision you painted that they both elected to do the 50% equity rather than the baseline 20.
I think they definitely see the future and how this is going to be possible, and they bought into it. To your point, and they would have been leaving a lot of money on the table if they hadn't.
And then in terms of financing the deal, so you have an interesting story here because one of your insurance carriers, your insurance partners, ended up financing the deal. How did that come together?
That was a great blessing because we originally started a fund that we were raising money to acquire businesses, and we were willing to pay 10% for those dollars because it's a little bit tricky to buy a company, even though it is something that we know about and we feel confident that we can run because we run our own. From an investor standpoint, there's not a lot of collateral, right? I mean, if any, it's just a personal guarantee kind of thing or whatever. But and so as we were doing that, a friend of ours said, "Well, have you talked to any of your insurance carriers because they have money that they have to put to work? Otherwise, they can't produce the guarantees that they give you in these contracts." And so it's like, oh man, we didn't even think about that. Like we just thought of banks or SBA or whatever. And so we went to them and we just said, "Hey, we're one of your top producers. And do you have deals that you're looking to finance that this would fall into?" And they were like, "Absolutely, we'd love to talk to you about it." And so yeah, they financed the entire deal, and they've agreed to the earnout even being a part of it, a large percentage of it, not 100%, but they definitely were very intrigued and gave us better terms than we would have gotten at a bank at that time for sure, and it just took the pressure off of having to go and raise it.
That's awesome. And I feel like something people don't think about enough is just the fact that your potential customers or your potential business partners could finance your next acquisition. I've definitely had a few people on the pod who mentioned that their customers were the ones who either financed the acquisition or became their buyer. Talking about this bigger vision, you're building toward a 10 million in EBITDA with a goal of eventually selling the company.
Hmm.
Having been through an acquisition, how are you thinking now about getting to that 10 million number through organic growth versus through other acquisitions?
Well, so Kate, we have been working towards a 10 million number because we know that that could put us in 150 million category, which would be amazing. The problem is if we were to do that in a time frame that we feel comfortable with, which is the next 24 to 48 months, it's going to take a lot of acquisitions to get there because a lot of the people in our space are in the maybe 1 million to maybe 1.5 million in EBITDA. And so it would take a lot of those to get us to this 10 million mark very quickly. And as we've been thinking through it, we're like, wait a minute, 10 million with, let's just say, 4 million of it being acquired, 4 or 5, that means we have all the debt service that goes with that. That means we have all the integration challenges that go with that. That means we have all of the personnel that we have to hire to manage all of those processes. In fact, we have a search out right now for a president who has acquired companies and gone to exit multiple times. Guess what? That is not a cheap hire. That is a very unique, specific individual who requires not only a very large salary, high bonus potential, and equity. So you start whittling away at the overall pie and you think, okay, we could get there and all these things have to go well to get us to 150 million, But what would be the net? Because now we've got equity for each one of those people we've acquired, equity for a president, and all the debt service that has to be paid. It ends up leaving you, you know, a great number. I'm not, I would be happy with it, but it also increases the risk a lot. And so as we've been thinking through this, and maybe even since you and I originally talked, we've thought, I wonder if we just focused on organic growth and we could get to a $70 million exit, about half of what we were thinking, the net is really not that much lower than if we were to go to 150 million with all these other factors. So I will tell you, if you're asking me right now today,
Yeah.
I think we are going to focus on doing what we do really well, but doing it at the best we can from an organic growth, add some additional lead sources, add some additional efficiencies, and focus on full steam ahead for the next 24 to 36 months. And I think we'll be more happy with the outcome, less stress, and not taking on as much risk to have very similar results in terms of the actual exit compensation, whatever we will receive.
Yeah. That's such an interesting perspective that through selling your company for essentially half of what you're originally planning to, but structuring it differently, you're pretty much getting the same payout. And it sounds like for you, way less headache in terms of all the integrations and all the paperwork you would have had to read through. So switching gears just a little bit, you've created this very interesting concept where you help people figure out what investment type suits them best based on their investor DNA. What is investor DNA and how can investors apply it?
Well, the investor DNA is the thing that nobody ever talks about. And people always want to know, hey, how can I become financially free? It must be the investment itself. Like, hey, Kate, what do you invest in? Oh, well, you invest in real estate, so I should invest in real estate. And I don't think that that's really wise, because and the reason is because your investor DNA is your God-given personality type, the way you see the world, your experiences, your resources, they're all so different, right? And so for you to expect that same outcome as someone else who has made all their money in mobile home parks, for instance, or this other person has done great with short-term rentals and Airbnb, it does not mean you're going to have the same results, right? And so what is the biggest indicator of success? And we believe it's the things that match up to our personality type. So Kate, you may be somebody who is highly influential and like loves people and would love to host people. You'd be great with short-term rentals versus somebody who is very conscientious and detail oriented and like wants to really dig into the numbers of everything. They would hate short-term rentals because it is really a hosting business. It is a people business. And they don't really want to deal with people. They want to deal with numbers and concrete, steady things. And those things are very, very different and they should be treated as such. So we developed this investor DNA after trying a bunch of things everybody else was doing and realizing that is a mistake. We should not have invested in that. And we started saying, oh, well, what is it about us that did really well with this versus this? And we went and we developed that with the DISC profile. If you've ever looked at the DISC personality profile, we partnered with them and they created this where you can take a profile quiz and it literally gives you your style, like who you are. And then we partner that with our passive income matrix. It has like 16 different passive income ideas. And it tells you, what will you like about this? What will you not like about this? What sort of resources are required? What sort of skill sets required to be successful in this genre or in this area, this asset class? And the whole idea is to help you filter because we're in an age of information overload. Well, this helps you to say, I'm going to filter down by my personality type. Maybe these one or two things I should go deep in because they really match up with me. And I think it helps people get clarity and confidence, which those two things alone will make you a better investor.
That sounds like such a fantastic resource. If I or someone in the audience wanted to take this investor DNA test, where could they do it?
So, one, you can just reach out to our team. You can join our community online. Go to wealth@wallstreet.com/community. Or you can actually even talk to one of our people about our passive income lab. So, the investor DNA is the first step in our process. It's a 12-week investor training that helps you figure out your investor DNA, helps you build a buy box, helps you use AI tools to discern deals, to learn how to talk to operators, gives you all the confidence that you need to create your first $500 a month in passive income or your next $500 a month. You go to choosepassiveincome.com. You can learn more about that. You can.
So, Joey, apart from running multiple businesses, you also have 5 children. And instead of going the traditional path of sending them to school and then to college and then to a job, you decided to homeschool your kids. And now your two eldest, instead of college, are running vending machine businesses and flipping land. So, what is your approach to raising kids to think like business owners?
I believe that largely our education system is not designed to encourage the highest level of growth. They're really bringing people to a standardization for the purpose of the labor force. And I know that being a business owner gives me more of what I want, gives me more freedom, gives me more say so, gives me more of a much higher limit on what I can earn. I'll give you a practical example. Rather than giving my now 18-year-old who just graduated trigonometry when she didn't really have interest in being an engineer or anything beyond just the standard kind of knowledge of math, we focused on career math instead of trigonometry. And what did she learn in that? Well, that was dad meeting with her every week and going through, hey, how do credit cards work? What types of mortgages are there? How could you house hack a property instead of just going and renting an apartment somewhere? How do people, budget? How do you pay off debt? Like, what is debt? How does that work? All these things that you wish somebody had taught you in high school, I was
Sure.
literally getting able to do that. And we did it on the golf course, by the way, which was even more fun. I didn't really seek out to say, oh, I want them all to be business owners. What I really wanted them to do is to have the skill set to see opportunity in the world and how could they add value to their families in the future world. And what is an entrepreneur at the end of the day? They're a problem solver. Fortunately, I was able to take my older two, especially, to different conferences with me. And they would go and sit in the meetings with the people that were the short-term rental experts and the vendingpreneur experts and the person teaching creative finance on how to buy real estate with no money down or seller financing or whatever the case may be. They were meeting with guys that were launching brands, e-commerce brands on Amazon. And, well, what do you like about that? What do you do? And so anyways, my oldest ended up launching a land flipping business where she buys raw land in Texas. We live in Alabama, by the way. And she buys it at 25 to 30 cents on the dollar and sells it on owner financing terms to people, creating over $4,000 a month in passive income.
That's amazing.
And she's been doing that since she was 15. She's now 20, and she has a virtual assistant that helps her. And now my 18-year-old has 3 vending machines that she's helping to stock right now, but she has she has goals of, once we get to a certain number, I want to hire an operator to be able to fill these and manage these. And she has a car that we bought and we put on Turo, and it's a car rental platform, but we have an operator that runs it for her, and it creates $600 to $800 a month of net cash flow to her. The big thing for me was, how can I equip them? They're going to choose whatever they want to do, but how can I equip them with the things that, if I look back and say, man, I wish I knew blah 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 blah, I would be so remiss if I didn't take what I now know and try to pass it on to them.
I absolutely love that. That's fantastic. Joey, it's been wonderful talking to you. I've learned so much on this pod. There are two questions that we always wrap up the pod with. So, you're running and growing an insurance agency and a media company. How are you using AI in your work?
Wow. I would say we are at the very tip of the iceberg right now, but we are using it in our content creation, in terms of just leveraging wording, and how that how we're prepping for podcasts, how we're creating social media graphics and other things. We're also using it in our email communication quite a bit. Um, we've just been purchasing like little Mac Minis and things like that that we can then give to those key employees, who can now double or triple their output because they have that Claude Cowork, similar to like an Open Claude type of deal, working these other tasks on their behalf. And so we're not trying to shrink our employee force. We're trying to enable and equip them to be more and more efficient using the tools.
Into a little more detail as to how you're using Claude Cowork for marketing?
So, for instance, they are using it to even go through and do audits on our blogs, audits on our website, our YouTube page. You can have it actually going through YouTube and adding different metadata and things that will make it more searchable. So SEO in particular, I think, is a big undercurrent that AI can help you with.
That's awesome. I'm gonna borrow some of those. And for the podcast, you also mentioned that you use some other AI tools, or this is all still in Claude?
Primarily Claude or ChatGPT, where we will take an intro call with somebody, and I will ask them some pretty key questions that I'll then take the transcript from that's being recorded and dump it into like a custom GPT, or in Claude, we have some different things that we use, and it will build an outline that will help us to then have a way in which we can direct the conversation the best and use the guest's best information. And then in some cases, there's gaps that we didn't cover, and I can send questions to that guest ahead of time. Hey, these are some things that I'd like to dive in a little bit deeper on, and they can even send us back some responses. We can build out even more robust outlines. So that's been very helpful. And I think the other thing we've done around the podcast is, as we're coming up with titles, and not really to thumbnails yet on YouTube, but we want to get there, is you could just ask it, what's the best SEO, focused title for this, and give me your top 3 or whatever. It just helps us to not have to wonder, oh, I'm going to go with this title because this is going to help us be found more easily.
Yeah,
And so then we just pick the one that we like the best.
that's awesome. And you said that you use some particular tools within ChatGPT. What
Well,
are those?
you can create like a custom GPT. So like, instead of doing it fresh every time, you, like, for instance, we have one that helps us scan and preview podcast pitches. So we don't have to, like, we get so many pitches every
Mhm.
week. We can just take that email and dump it into this GPT, and it does all the background checks. It does all the, hey, this is what this guy's going to talk about, or this girl's going to talk about, and it matches up with your content, or it doesn't, and this is why. And but you can build those kind of one-time tasks that do it over and over and over again, and we use it for a lot of things around the podcast.
That's awesome. So you build custom GPTs for the repetitive tasks that you have to do for the podcast. And
Absolutely.
you've done how many episodes now?
I think we're almost 700, something like that.
700 episodes. Wow, that's incredible. So I bet there are a lot of repetitive tasks there.
Lots.
Yes. Joey, loved having you on. Who else should we have on the pod?
Just so happens in the last several weeks, we've had intros or podcasts with 3 people I think you should interview. A gentleman named Param Shah with Linfield, a guy named Lee Smith with Verdani Capital. He's out of the UK. And then Gary McDermott is with USA Private Equities based out of Arizona. And just really great people, but they're all talking acquisitions and different strategies and different case studies of how they've applied that.
Thank you so much for the recommendation. Appreciate you listing 3. I would love to have them all on. And I would love to speak to you again about your future successes as well.
Happy to come back on. I see it as a privilege.
Thank you so much, Joey.